All right, let's call to order the Airway Heights Planning Commission meeting on 23rd August 2023. It's now 6:08 p.m. We'll do our roll call. Commissioner Collins, present. Commissioner Andre,
Present.
Commissioner Bill.
Present.
Commissioner Don is going to be joining us shortly. He's excused for the time being. Commissioner Justin Davis is excused until further notice. And we have our new commissioner, Brenda Ponce, joining us tonight. Commissioner Brenda, are you present?
Yes, thank you, present.
And you know what? I just realized I jumped ahead of our commissioner reports and staff reports today, so I apologize, guys.
It's all right. Yeah, so this is the new format that we discussed last meeting. So yeah.
I apologize for that. So on the commission reports, I'm very, you guys are talking about it pre-meeting. I'm very grateful that the city got spared from these fires, and it was nice to see the communities come together during that time. So I'm very thankful that we live in a community like we do and have access to that. And I will let whoever else wants to speak for their commission reports.
I'll just throw out that I had a good conversation today with the, I guess he's the Director of Public Works, Kevin Anderson. And I had been looking into some questions I had about the traffic calming strategies, and particularly as it applied to the Sunrise Edition up at Hunter's Crossing development, which we're waiting to eventually look at, I guess. And anyway, had a good long conversation on the phone with him. He explained the strategies, a little bit of the history, and the rationales, and that was a really good conversation. He spoke very highly of our two planners. So yeah, it was a good chance to chat with him a little bit, and look forward to meeting him in person. But I appreciated his getting back to me and getting that information. Yeah.
Yeah, Kevin's a good guy.
Sounds like Don's here. I'm hoping Don's here. Hey, it's Don.
Howdy.
Hi.
Oh, look at that. All right. I can still see you good.
Yeah.
That's oh.
All right, so nice to see you, Don. Andre, Brenda, Dom, do you guys have anything you want to add to the commissioner reports?
Nope. Oh, sorry.
No.
Okay, staff reports. What do you guys got for us?
Europe.
Why am I going first?
I always go first. That's why.
Oh, let's see. It's all a blur. So we are working with the applicant on the Sunrise at Hunter's Crossing. They had some questions with regards to the code and their development. So we're actually meeting with them tomorrow to discuss those questions and see if we can answer them. They wanted to get these questions answered before they came to the Planning Commission for hearing. So hopefully we'll be able to assist with that and perhaps bring this to hearing for the Planning Commission at your next regularly scheduled meeting. We also have been doing a lot of work on the projects for the grants that we have. Unfortunately, because of the fire over Medical Lake and the really poor air quality conditions, Airway Heights Day was canceled. And with that, our booth, which we were going to have to engage citizens about the 6th Avenue project, and potentially the Craig Avenue multi-use bicycle and walking path, did not happen. So we are now looking at joining the last farmers market over at the hub on September 9th. So that we can have another opportunity to engage the community around the design for those projects. So we also have been very busy in a couple of different areas, which include completing kind of this year or the season grant writing for transportation projects. So we did apply for the Transportation Improvement Board for 2 grants. One is for some additional money for 6th Avenue for some traffic calming alternatives, and for some additional money for Hayford Road, both north and south of US 2. We had previously received a grant from the Spokane Regional Transportation Council to do a chip and overlay to save the road. When you do preservation like that, it helps the roads live for decades longer. They were only able to give us a partial award of the total amount we needed for the project. So we put into this other state agency for the additional money. And hopefully we'll find out in December, and that project would be next year. So kind of on that theme of, we have a lot of traffic detours next year. Just to recap, that'll be 10th Avenue, Hayford Road, 6th Avenue, Craig, and US 2 in 3 spots, which will include Lyons in US 2, Craig in US 2, and Spokane Fuel in US 2. So we'll be working over the couple next months to try and see if we can coordinate the traffic control plan. So we'll make it's not going to be good, but hopefully not make it worse for everybody for traffic control. And then we're also beginning to gear up for code amendments this winter. And so we'll be coming and talking to you a little bit more about that, as well as we're looking to get some grants to assist us with the required state comprehensive plan. So we're doing some research around money that may be available because it's a very expensive process, and the state doesn't provide enough funding to help communities do these state required updates to codes and the comprehensive plans. I think that's probably kind of a synopsis in the last couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Zach.
Yeah, I just wanted to update on 2 projects, one that may come to you and one that will definitely not come to you, but it's kind of fun. So first one. So the planning department also works with a second citizen commission, the Arts Commission. And last week, sorry, I'm balancing mics here. We actually reviewed submissions to do an art wrap on this utility box right here in front of Wolfie's. And we did select a winner, and we were kind of working on the logistics right now, but we're hoping to have that wrapped probably sometime. I wanted to share one more thing. Sometime a little bit later, probably late October, November, something like that. It depends on WashDOT is actually swapping that box out, so we're kind of waiting for them to do that, so we don't wrap it, they throw it away, kind of a thing. But yeah, no, we did pick a local artist. She's from right down the street from where we're sitting right here. She submitted a really cool watercolor, kind of showing, the blue sky in Airway Heights, and had a little Airway Heights map on it. It was awesome. So the Arts Commission put a ton of work into that, and it's kind of their first project. So we're really excited to kind of kick that off and get that moving. The second thing that might actually come to you, we have an application for a variance at this point. So this property here is zoned RM for manufactured housing. We have 2 RM zone parcels in the city. One is the Rainbow Park, which is right down here. Sorry, we're going really slow. Right here. And the other is this vacant park. We do have an applicant who's looking to put in a new manufactured home park. At this point, they can't meet the minimum standards since the parcel is about 4.75 acres. It's required to be 5 acres. So they've applied for a variance to see if they can put it in on 4.75. We're in the process of reviewing the application. The application will go to the hearings examiner. If the hearing examiner decides to grant them the variance, then they will apply for a manufactured home park and that will come to you. So this is months away for now, so nothing, but just to get it on your radar that this might be something that you might see. So those are the only two projects I wanted to provide updates on. So yeah.
So is
Awesome.
I'm sorry, is the utility artistry, thing, is that gonna be something that will happen on all of the utility boxes eventually? Is that kind of where we're going, or is this just a
So
one-hit wonder?
the one is for now it's a one-hit wonder, and the reason being we have funds for the art wrap, but they're dedicated to revitalization of downtown and Airway Heights. So we do have that downtown core that we've talked about a couple times, and that's the only utility box within that core. So we have money that's dedicated specifically for that area, and it's the only one we have to do. So long term, we'll see with that, but as of right now, it's just going to be that box.
One of the things that we're
Awesome.
looking at with the Arts Commission is, or for the Arts Commission, their funding sources for art. And so that ranges from setting aside 1% capital projects that could be used for art. And so one of the things we're talking about, for example, is, with the acquisition of this new building for City Hall, that part of that funding would be set aside for art and for the Arts Commission to identify how that could be used. So absolutely placemaking, all kinds of art, visual art, performing art, are all options available through the art plan that was adopted. But this was funding that the commission had available to them that was targeted to, of course, the downtown revitalization. So there could be other investments in the downtown that the commission will consider specifically, and then depending on how the money can be applied, where it would be able to go. So capital construction, public buildings, does the art go in the building, on the building, around the building, kind of looking at that.
Yep, awesome. Well, I appreciate that, Heather and Zach. Let's move on. We'll do this roll call officially now. I apologize for the first time. So, is Brenda chair A or spot A or spot C?
She would be spot A. She's seat 5. So yeah, it doesn't matter in terms of A, B, C, D, E, F, G, but she is the seat 5. So
Okay, okay. Well, I'm just gonna go in that order pretty much every time, so I'm just gonna follow that. So, Commissioner Brenda Ponce, present. Commissioner Mark Collins, present. Vacant. Commissioner Bill Campbell, present. Commissioner Don Mitchell, present. Commissioner Justin Davis on a excused leave of absence, and Commissioner Andre Dubb, present. Move on to this Pledge of Allegiance.
sorry, we're swapping around a lot today.
No, no worries. Did you guys get a flag down there in the meeting room, or?
Not yet. But we
Gotcha.
have Amazon.com to help us out today. So we appreciate our
Nice.
friends at Amazon.
We do have a new camera in here though, Mark.
I'm sorry?
We have a new camera.
Yeah, it looks really good.
Yeah. Nice, nice. I pledge allegiance to the flag
Flag
Flag.
of the
United
United
States of
States of
America,
America and to
and to the republic which it stands,
one nation under God, indivisible, with
indivisible,
liberty and justice for all.
and justice
Yeah,
for
we'll
all.
work on it.
Yeah, I apologize for that, because I know it's just the lag on Zoom sometimes that creates that issue with that Pledge of Allegiance. All right. Do you mind, can I get somebody to make a motion to approve tonight's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Ayes have it. The agenda is approved for tonight. Do you mind pulling up the meeting minutes from last time, Zach?
Yeah.
So therefore, July 26th, which was our last meeting.
Okay. Can I get somebody to make a motion on the minutes from the July 26th meeting?
So moved. Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
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 The ayes have it. Approval of the minutes from July 26th. So we don't have public comment tonight, correct?
We did not have any members of the public currently here, no.
Okay, and we don't have presentations tonight or public hearings tonight. So we'll move on to our workshops.
Yay! Pull up
Nice.
the PowerPoint.
Sorry, didn't know which direction you wanted to go.
Perfect. Oh, thank you very much. So on the table here, there are two printed versions of the full plan. So if you feel more comfortable thumbing through paper version, feel free to grab a copy. We're going to go through a brief overview since we've already discussed each of the chapters in its draft form of the updates or changes that occurred to this volume 1, as well as what our next steps are going to be for the plan. And I have to thank Zach because he did a wonderful job creating this PowerPoint presentation. He's much more talented than I am in this area.
I can make PowerPoints, guys.
You can do so
Nice
much more.
job.
Thank you. Okay, moving on to the next slide. So we do have Brenda, who is new for the group, but this is also going to be brief to the city council. And so as I go through this, if you have some suggestions of what to add to this, that would be great. We also have many new council members, and we're hoping to make this as concise and easy to understand as possible, because that's the goal, right? Okay. So Growth Management Act, which is a law that requires that we do a master plan called the comprehensive plan that touches on about 7 different areas for policy development. And by law, we're required to utilize those policies to help guide decisions, everything from what we eventually have as a zoning map to what we identify on our 6-year capital improvement plan for buildings and fire engine purchases, to transportation investments, economic development strategies, housing strategies, park strategies, etc. So everyone in this county, Spokane County, has been doing mandatory planning under growth management since about 2000. And when a county is required to do it, all the cities within it have to do it too. So long story short, this is not our first ring around the rosy with a comprehensive plan. And right before Zach and I came to the city was the last required or mandated update. So everybody in the county and every city was required to have their plan adopted by June of 2017. That was the last, what we call periodic update. The city was behind in getting that plan done. And there are consequences to having that plan be out of sync with the adoption timeline, which means that the city becomes ineligible for grants, state grants, and for state loans. And that was impacting the Parks Department and the transportation programs. So the city had hired a consultant, and consultant reviewed where they were and what needed to be done in order to get into compliance. And this was about 2018, so this was a year after the deadline. And at that time, the city was already starting to kick up and grow. And the consultant was aware that the city leaders, which was the council at the time, were very interested in addressing how growth was impacting the community. So higher than normal growth rate, in just over a decade, the city's population doubled, etc. But there was so much work to be done on the plan that the city leaders determined that probably the best course of action was to at least get a compliant plan. And there had been some previous work done, and so the consultant was going to consolidate that work and produce a compliant plan. But the city leaders wanted to do another plan after that in order to look more closely at growth and how it was impacting things like city services, how much available land that we had for the different activities, and would we get a chance to kind of get ahead of this growth by taking a look at what was happening as a result. So the city council bookmarked that they wanted to do a plan after that required update and to focus on growth. Can you go to the next slide? So the city committed funding to do this additional plan, which maybe we could call it the interim plan. And we hired 2 consultants to help us with that project. And those consultants were Framework and Big Sky Public Relations. Now, Framework specializes in the actual text and the development of the plan and reviewing policies and organizing the analysis. And Big Sky Public Relations was going to help us with the community engagement. And one of the requirements of growth management is you have to have early and continuous public engagement. So you have to have engagement throughout the process. Whereas before growth management, many communities would have a hearing at the end, like here it is. So there wasn't a lot of opportunity for community feedback in order to help with the development of the plan. And that's what public relations firms do. We also brought in a number of city departments, and we brought in our existing consultants. So Airway Heights is such a small city that we don't have the ability to do some of the work in-house because we don't have staff. So civil engineering, so our water plans, our wastewater plans are done by Century West, and we have transportation engineering firm, which is Ardura, formerly known as TO Engineering. And they already do a lot of day-to-day work with us, and so they were brought in to help with this update as well. Early on, we were talking with the consultant and with the plan commission about, we want this to be a document that the community uses. This should not be a staff document. It shouldn't be a tome on a shelf, like the ones I'm pointing to in the back of the room. It should be something that's easily accessible and understandable by all the potential users. That's the general public, it's developers, it's other engineers and architects and so forth. And so through the course of the project, which has been going on since about 2021 to now, so about a year and a half, the decision was to break up the plan into 2 volumes. And the first volume would be a condensed version of just the re-envisioned city. So there was a new vision statement created as part of the public engagement process, goals, policies, action step strategies, and maps. And it would be all organized by these required chapters for growth management, which is transportation, land use, housing, parks, utilities, capital facilities, and economic development. So 7 chapters. Volume 2 would have more of the technical analysis. It would have the finer detail, and that gets more attention when we think of utilities chapter, where we talk about how we analyzed our water system needs and our sewer system needs, or we look at transportation, where we look at things like, how do we know we need to make an improvement at this intersection because we've adopted levels of service? Well, what levels of service did we adopt? And so it will have all the appendices in there. Now that is going to be completed shortly, probably by next week. And so when we have our next meeting in September, we will be seeing that volume 2, which will be the technical background that goes with comprehensive plan. And that technical background created the 6-year and 20-year transportation plan that you'll see today, as an example. So volume 1, you see the plan and how we're going to pay for it. Volume 2 is like what analysis we did to arrive at this is what we need to do. And the third piece that was created recently was the idea that once this is all done, again, so it's not a tome sitting on a shelf or it's a gigantic PDF resting on a website, is that we'd actually do a web-based comp plan, and only a couple communities in Washington State have done this. So it will look like a website and you'll be able to click and look around at these big ideas and easily find information rather than combing through an entire plan to get an answer. And so the city committed some additional funds to this project in order to help us get there. And so I think that is great because that puts us more on the cutting edge than other communities in the state with regards to ease of access of our plan. So it's visually oriented in volume 1, which you've seen before. And there'll be a lot of graphics in here. And those graphics are intended to help reader understand that a policy or a goal may apply to more than one chapter because it's so broad. And we'll give some examples of what that looks like. I'll go on to the next one. So just to help make this in a 30,000-foot overview as simple as possible, there are only a couple of key items. If you read all of the pages, these are really the things that you'd walk away from. We're increasing residential lands. The analysis that was done, it's called the land quantity analysis, and we're required to do that under growth management and also under countywide planning policies. Found that we had more than enough industrial and more than enough commercial, but we are running out of residential land, and that was the greatest need that we had. And so in this process over the last year and a half, we worked with the consultant and the Plan Commission to develop some 3 alternatives with different properties, potentially changing use, some different areas we could grow into, future annexation areas. The Planning Commission picked a preferred alternative that was presented to the City Council, and they made some tweaks to it. And the map that you see before you is the map that the council voted on. And we call that the preferred alternative because it was the final version of the options that were presented with some additional asks from the Planning Commission and the City Council. They all got incorporated, and I can explain what that map looks like. But generally, here's the big ticket items. Walking away, it increased the available residential lands as medium density is about 50 acres. And so it's that yellow area on the top right-hand side of the map. It brought forward the downtown plan that we adopted in 2021 that recommended some high density residential areas immediately north of the downtown. So that's the orange area you see in the middle of the map that is looking like it's a U shape around a blue square, and that's the Sunset Elementary. And I included what these densities are. So medium density residential is up to 10 units per acre. High density is between 10 and 20 units per acre. And the plan also brought forward a couple of kind of pending applications for land use changes. One was the Airway Heights LLC, that's an ownership that was seeking to go to medium density residential for about 50 acres. And so those are the orange spots. Actually, it's like a light medium yellow. Can you use your mouse to show where those are at?
I can't in
PowerPoint. So if you were to look at the 2 blue spots on the left-hand side of the map, just north of that are a couple of parcels that are medium orange. And those are the ones that are proposed. Now, they were adopted as medium density residential in the last comprehensive plan. But they had some requirements they needed to meet before they actually could be zoned medium density residential, and the property owners have not met those conditions. And so part of the decision is, does the city want to keep those as medium density residential and continue to allow the owner the opportunity to meet those conditions or not? The other one is the Kalispell owned property, which is that reverse L, which is a dark orange. That was an application made in 2019 before Zach and I came to the city by the Kalispell tribe, and they were seeking to rezone 28 acres from commercial to high density residential. And again, high density residential is 10 to 20 units per acre. That application did not get approved by the City Council. The Planning Commission had not recommended approval of it. The city council decided that they would like to see the Kalispills come back and propose a development agreement that would reduce the density and would keep the buildings as low scale residential before they wanted to re-review this application. And the Kalispel tribes have worked on the development agreement, but they've not completed it. And so in this case, does the city want to redesignate the property or they want to not? So we basically carried forward some applications for changing density that never finished to make a final decision on it. That's why they're there. Okay, number two, we proposed a new urban growth area. So the fact about this is that the city has currently urban growth areas. So that is an existing urban growth area. And then the ones south of US 2 and the ones that are west of the green land, which is the Spokane Trust land, already exist. We've had those in our comprehensive plan as an urban growth area for a number of plans. Now, an urban growth area is an area needed by a local agency to eventually grow into, because when we forecast land, we say in 20 years, this is how much commercial, industrial, or residential land we need. If we say we can contain it all within ourselves, we never ask for an urban growth area. But Airway Heights had projected that we likely within a 20-year planning period would need to eventually annex areas outside our city, and having it designated as an urban growth area is a precursor requirement under the state law. You cannot annex a piece of property that is not also already adopted as an urban growth area. We have an urban growth area, which is the big white hole in this map, which is the off-road vehicle park just north of our residential area. It probably should never have been designated as a UGA. It's owned by the county. It will never urbanize. It will always be a park because it has state funding into it as a park. The county has had past discussions about this. They agree it probably shouldn't be a future annexation area for a city, or will never have urban growth. And remember, I talked about the alternatives. Well, the selected alternative by the council was to add about 130 acres on the west side of the city, just north of the Spokane tribe, as an urban growth area. So we would be giving up the off-road vehicle park, still remain in the county. It's not in the city today, but for purposes of trying to meet residential development, that was the property that was identified as a potential annexation area sometime in the future. We would be proposing it as an additional urban growth area for the city. We propose urban growth areas to Spokane County because under the state law, they're the ones that do the final adoption. All of these designations are identified at some density in order to help us meet our housing requirement. Again, we're almost out of residential land. Most of these areas are proposed for at least 10 units per acre, or a minimum or a maximum of 10 units per acre. That would be a way to describe it. So some of the requirements that the city placed on it was they wanted to make sure it was inside our water service boundary. Why is that important? Because when you look at this map on the right-hand side from top to bottom, and over is a purple line, and that actually is our water service boundary. So we and every other water district and agency in the county entered into a coordinated water service plan, and we don't have the right to provide water outside of that boundary. We do have the right to provide it inside of there. So it is difficult to contemplate having a future city area outside of our own water service boundary. So one of the things that would happen in the future, if for some reason that there was a desire to look at land on the east side of Hayford Road, we should be considering, before a comprehensive plan map change, we would want to talk to the city of Spokane about amending the water service boundary between the two agencies. Does that make sense? The other request that came in from the council had to do with the blue line on the north side, the dotted north line, which was the desire to have any future annexation area be within the Cheney School District boundary. And that is the Cheney School District boundary. North of that line belongs to the Great Northern School District. So number one, we increased the number of residential lands. Number two, we proposed a new urban growth area. Next slide. Number three, we included some important policy updates. There was a lot of conversation about someday having neighborhood commercial closer to residential. So it sets up a policy to eventually review that and designate it so it's closer to residential areas. Right now, all of our commercial is down US 2, and there's a little bit that goes up Craig Road. The other policy update is missing middle. There was a whole presentation about duplexes, triplexes, fourplexes, townhomes, accessory dwelling units, and courtyard apartments, which are small scale, small unit buildings, as well as clustered subdivisions that are small unit on a common property, also called cottage housing, that our code doesn't even contemplate or help us get to. And so it embraces as a policy that we want to see that's kind of housing coming. It is a precursor to a state law that was passed in 2022 and amended in 2023 that now requires us to have missing middle housing. So we're putting it in here now. We're going to be required by the next plan to have it and to actually update our development regulations to allow it. And then the other area is that there's a policy about condensing our low and medium density categories for residential. So low is up to 5 units per acre. Medium is up to 10 units per acre. Why is this in here? Another state law passed this year that makes it so that by 2026, Airway Heights will be required to allow 2 units on every single residential lot. So communities are considering eliminating language or types of zoning that talks about R1 single family housing, because in just a couple of years, that would be an option, but we are required to allow denser than single family on every lot. Let that sink in for a second. Okay. The other big ticket items are, we have capital plans for transportation. So there'll be some maps in here showing where we need to fill in sidewalk, biking routes, and roadway projects. This is a big part of what we do, is to make sure we have multimodal facilities, that we're bridging gaps for walking and biking. This is also a precursor to help us with the next required changes in the next plan, because we will be required to adopt levels of service for multimodal transportation. So we dabble in it in this plan and we set it. We will be required to do so in 2 years. Water supply alternatives. How many people in this room and on our Zoom are aware of the conversations about water availability in Airway Heights?
Well, I know there's water restrictions that count.
More than just the odd day watering?
Oh, well, I know about that. No.
Don?
Yeah, aren't there like some limitations on, since we're getting it from Spokane, you can only limit it on new developments and how many each development can do per year, and
Right.
that's one of the issues. And then the whole other, someday getting back to Airway Heights water.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, I remember that conversation.
Yep. So just as a synopsis, in 2017, the city was notified that all of our wells were contaminated with PFOA and PFAS. As of 2023, the acceptable limit for PFAS and PFOA at the federal level is 4 parts per trillion.
Yeah.
And Airway Heights wells are 1,500. So the city immediately tried to flush the system. We already had an emergency water intertie with the city of Spokane. We developed another intertie, and since then, we've been buying our water from Spokane on an emergency basis. And the city of Airway Heights has been involved over all of these years trying to look at alternatives. And why are we looking at alternatives? Well, we want a sustainable water supply. The city will be here for hundreds of years into the future. And so we want to make sure that we're taking care of those future generations. We need to address growth that's naturally going to occur. We have a significant amount of low-income households and those that are on the cusp of being a low income. We've talked about this before, which is ALICE, which is asset limited, income constrained, and employed. So when you think of additional costs like daycare, transportation, utilities, and housing, those people would likely already be close to or at the poverty line under the federal guidelines, but they're technically not because of the way that the feds identify poverty. And we need to make sure that we have an affordable way to provide water. So we've been investigating different options, and this is where volume 2 gets into more detail about water analysis, like what kind of demand are we looking at over 20 years? We commissioned a market study from Leland, their national marketing and land use assessment firm, to look at what we would need to have for commercial, industrial, and residential. We derived some calculations as to what kind of water we would need. And so we looked at what those options were. And when we get volume 2, we'll go into that in more detail. But basically that's a huge part of this, as we looked at our supply alternatives and what we potentially could pursue in order to ensure long-term sustainable water supply that would be affordable for the community. The other thing that we did is we incorporated the downtown plan strategy. So remember I said we had a periodic update due in 2017. Well, we didn't adopt it till 2020. But we have followed up. Remember, the council wanted to start addressing growth, and one of the elements was to do a downtown plan, which we adopted in 2021. And it had some really great strategies about how to recognize the downtown, redevelop the downtown, retain business in the downtown, deal with multimodal and transportation facilities in the downtown. So those strategies have been carried forward into this plan, so they're visible and actionable as part of the plan. So those are the key takeaways. Seems like a lot, but out of 31 pages, if you could walk away with 7 things and be able to describe it to somebody, you think that would be a good overview?
Nice. On 31 pages, yeah. Give me 7 points. I'll give you the 7 points. And if you got anything else, I don't have,
Yeah,
I don't have anything for
If it
you.
takes more than 10 digits, it's too much to explain it, right? Because we don't pull out our toes, right?
Right.
Right.
At least I don't.
There's a lot of more detail in the plan. And one of the things that Bill had asked several meetings ago, which was where the policies come from. For the most part, the goals and policies came from the 2020 plan. They were largely, many of them were unchanged, but they added to the policies and they supplemented some of the policies in some of the chapters. And as we reviewed each of the chapters, we talked about what some of those new policies were. But that's essentially kind of the things that were carried forward, the big digestible pieces. Now, from your review of the plan, have I missed any of the big points that we should talk about, or that we want the community to know or discuss with the council? And I got to time myself because I have to make sure I have to do this in less than 30 minutes, because pretty much no one's going to listen to me after that.
I don't think that's true, Heather.
You'd be surprised.
Yeah, we live in a TikTok world. People only have their attention 15 to 20 seconds at a time. So
Yeah.
Yep,
You gotta know.
exactly. Yep.
7,000 tweets.
Right.
No, I think, I mean, when you talk about what we've covered, I think you've hit the major points that somebody would ask about. It's always housing, it's water, it's transportation, it's, those fundamental things. And so if we can get that, they can listen to that and walk away. I mean, this generation of people they would not, if this was a book, they're not reading 131 pages. They'll read 10 pages, maybe. But so when you condense it down to bite-sized pieces like that, I think it's attainable for someone to digest. And then if they have any additional questions, then you can come back and answer those questions for them. But I think those 7 are sufficient for what.
If I could just sit down and do a 2-page memo, do you think it'll get read?
Much better chance. Yes.
Yeah.
And then
Is that like a
catch their attention.
resume rule? If it's only one, it's gotta be 1 page. 'Cause
Yep.
it differs.
Yeah.
I actually had a question about, so the plan, and I look at the policies and some of the ones that have action items, with action strategies. And perhaps the answer is volume 2, but how does this generate marching orders? The military. It tells city departments or whatever to now go do this. Here's what we want to do. But what point does it become executable at, I guess, a department level to make these things happen?
Well, it is in, mostly in volume 1. So, is it possible to pull up volume 1 and go to the transportation chapter?
Yeah.
And I'll give you a really good example. So one of the things I want to identify is this is a plan that's supposed to span 20 years. Yes, we have to go back and revisit it in 1 year, and add a whole bunch of new requirements from the state. But for the most part, the idea is it's going to span over a 20-year period. So you're not going to be doing all of it at once.
That's probably wise.
Well, you just wouldn't be able to, but
Right, no, and I get that, appreciate that, and I think that's a very realistic view.
well, we're gonna pull up the transportation because this is gonna tie back to a lot of the work I've been assisting with for the last year. So here's some maps, and this is in volume 1. Go down to the multi-use path of the sidewalk map either way.
Sidewalks. Is that the one you're looking for?
Do the proposed sidewalks. So this is the marching order when it comes to transportation. This is an example of, we had the map above. I'm sorry, I should have let you stay on it, but we have a map showing all the gaps in the existing sidewalk system, right? And that Zach prepared that, by the way. This entire system is created by Zach and only by Zach, and Zach maintains it. And he is a hell of a asset to the city.
I didn't make these maps.
No city.
You don't want to put your name on that.
You made the map, but they created it off
The
of
data they're using.
the data they use.
But-
He created it. No, and cities of our size don't normally have the ability to create their own geographic information system and maintain it, and then be able to extrapolate data to exercises for analysis. So this is a huge kudos. But we never had a gap map. Can you go back up to it? Of sidewalk. And why is this important? Well, because our community, when we hear back and feedback, number 1 is the feeling that it's unsafe and it's a barrier to getting to essential facilities. Number 2, it's a requirement to connect facilities in order to make it accessible to all. And you don't have to do it all at once, you have to do it over a long time. And this is getting into a new state requirement we're gonna have to do, which is an ADA accessibility plan, and ADA stands for Americans with Disability Act. So we have this understanding of where all these gaps are. Well, when you have an annual investment plan for transportation, which the city does, and every city and county in the state of Washington that has been required to do growth management, you have an investment plan for transportation. This helps you identify where your deficiencies are, and then you go down to the next map This is our proposed prioritization plan to fill those gaps. And what did we do? We looked at primary methods of access, east, west, north, and south. We looked at points that people were working to get access to, and this becomes our marching orders. We now know, based on a map, and we adopt this, when we're looking for funding, when we're developing the annual project, we're looking to continue to peck away at this by filling those gaps, by following a map of how we're going to close in on those gaps and create a full network, which could take generations to do. It is not going to happen. And part of the reason why is because there is virtually no funding for local streets. Almost all funding is exclusively federally classified roads, which are collectors and arterials. So we will continue to work on this, but this is how we know the marching orders. So when I go to look for or hear of a grant opportunity that includes the ability to do sidewalk and biking, and there's multiple grants that do that, I'll look at this map and I'll show it and say, yep, I've gone through a community engagement process. I know what our deficiencies are. These are the community's priorities for getting the biking and the walking addressed. And the same thing with the roads, where we talk about road development. This is the basis of helping us create the 6-year and the 20-year capital plan. So it should be toward the end of the chapter here. I believe they put the table in there with the proposed 6 and 20-year capital projects. And maybe below the policies.
That's functional classification.
Yeah, this is level of service. So it must be in volume 2.
Yeah.
I thought they put it in here. This piece right here also helps us with the marching orders on when we know that there's a problem with the street, and that's level of service, which is required for every agency to define at what point that an intersection is experiencing failing service, which is delay time at the intersection. And it's an ABCDE, just like school system. And we've identified that, and there's a map in here that tells us which intersections are beginning to fail. And so it goes from a green, yellow, red. And so that becomes our marching order. We need to start looking for funding. Well, hopefully before it goes red, when it's still yellow, looking for funding to try and fix that intersection.
And you said we a lot of the time. Is that, are you meaning literally you guys, the planners, or is some of this? I guess what I'm driving maybe at is at what point, say, does Public Works take this as their marching order and say, okay, we need to go deal with this, or is it you guys highlighting these things and then trying to kind of lead the horse to water?
So for the transportation, capital, and the utility portion of this plan, those are the marching orders for the Public Works Department. Our role with the transportation portion of it is that we're assisting the Public Works Department in grant writing and project management. So that's one piece. The other piece is that when Zach and I review a project like Sunrise, or we look at the proposed manufactured home park, or we look at any project, we look at these policies and these plans, and it helps us to convey to the developer, you need to do a right-of-way dedication, you're going to have to put in sidewalk, and you're going to have to sidewalk, the road, and in this plan for the first time, we're also going to be having this new standard level of service for walking and biking. And so we'll be starting to measure projects in the future at our level in the planning department on a development application saying, here's what your level of service is because of where you're located. We have a map that tells us you don't have a sidewalk network. You have the options and the policies here about how you're going to bring up your walking and biking level of service as part of that. So we do consulting, if you will, on the grant writing, but those chapters fall to Public Works. And then we have a role as staff on development review to make sure that these policies happen where they're applicable. Like not all the policies are going to apply to a particular project, but you get what I mean.
Yeah, every major project, we prepare staff reports, and a portion of that is a literal conformance with the comprehensive plan. So we look at the comprehensive, I'll look at hypothetically, if that manufactured home park comes in and gets approved for the variance, I'll review it for consistency with the comprehensive plan and make a determination whether it's consistent or not based on what we're proposing. So yeah, we do that, 20 times a year with big projects, so.
And I hate, I don't want to take up, like, we could be here all night. If I keep going, but I have all these questions. Like, I came out of the Air Force after an 18 or so year career dealing with plans and the creation of plans, the implementation of plans. And the hardest part is always getting people to understand that the plan says you need to do this. And they go, I don't need to do that. Yeah, the plan says you need to do that. So when this plan is adopted, it's adopted by the city council signs off on this, or so it's a marching order for them too. It's an executable for them. They have to, in theory, as they do their part of the process of approving plats or developments or all of those legislative actions that they do, they should be adhering to this, correct?
Yeah, I mean, the idea, and Heather, please go off once I'm done here. The idea is the comprehensive plan is cementing the vision of the city council. So this is what we want the city to look like in the next 20 years.
Based on what the community said.
Correct.
So that's what all the community engagement leading up to this is about, is it was the voice of the community informing the planning commission and city council of what their preferences were. So then the council is, they're helping setting the funding to assist with implementing the plan, because that's part of their responsibility as a fiduciary responsibility. And when the city looks at various actions that they may undertake, they look to that plan for guidance. And so they should be following that. It's adopted by ordinance. It's required to be adopted by ordinance. It's not by resolution. But we do know from many court cases that it is a guideline. A comprehensive plan is still a guiding document. And there are things in here that we may never be able to achieve. So if you go to the economic development chapter and go, which is at the end of this, and go to some of the policies, we'll see some of the more detailed strategies that are in there. And some of them are pretty far reaching. Should be at the end. But there was the capital spending. Keep going down. It's just the economic development chapter.
Exciting.
And I'm sorry, since it's not gonna be on a website, it's not bookmarked as a PDF, so we still have to go through it, but by scrolling, which is painful, Plus it's on computer. So
Well,
here we're
you're-
curious. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, when you guys are looking for it, I was just gonna say, Bill mentioned earlier that he didn't want to waste time. I think that the time is valuable if you have something to contribute, so I don't mind listening. Just telling you my perspective there.
Thank you.
Keep going down. You need to get to the policies. Keep going. Going. Okay, wait. Here we go. P48 was a policy that was carried forward from the downtown plan. Support revitalization of existing business and commercial districts in area heights actions, including developing a business retention plan, creating a parking and business improvement authority, creating a local improvement district, which is a type of funding mechanism for improvements like water, sewer, streets, or strengthening businesses and support reinvestment in the downtown by enhancing visibility, access, and concentration of local business. These are action items. And so when we think about a council, there's a lot of actions and strategies. So for 2024, you know, which of all of these would be prioritized? Which would they want a department to work on? And then we need the tools in order to implement it. And we may not in 1 year, 2 years, 3 years be able to create a small business retention program. But it's still an action we could take because the policy is that we want to retain existing businesses in our downtown. So to answer your question, we have to do it. Do we not have to do it? Some of these are idealized and what our goals and policies would be. Some are much more specific, like levels of service, where maybe the policy says we're not going to allow for development to occur unless there is a level of service evaluation, and we can assure that level of service won't be lowered by that new development unless there's money set aside to make the improvement, or the improvement exists at the time the development goes in. I know that that's going to have to happen because there's a law behind that policy. And there's a whole system organized around making sure that there's an evaluation of the project, how we assess impact fees, and how those impact fees are assessed. So it may not be a simple answer as to how and when policies get applied, because some are based on a law in the background and some are more aspirational.
Because that one about develop a business retention program, that's a great example, because my first thought is, well, whose job is that? Well, we don't have, I'm gathering, we don't have somebody who does that, right? We don't have an economic development office, do we?
No, but in a small city, people wear many hats, which is why I'm doing grant writing for the Public Works Department. And Albert is doing some economic development strategies. I'm doing economic development strategies. I wrote a grant application with a consultant last year for a facade renovation program for the downtown area last year. So that's an economic development strategy. And that's actually one of the downtown strategies. So we look across them. They're all great ideas. They help support the greater vision of the downtown plan and the comp plan. And we heard this distinctly over and over again from the community, which is they wanted people to feel like they arrived in Airway Heights. They wanted to have a traditional downtown. They wanted to have a place making around the downtown with small scale local businesses. And we heard very strongly from the community that they wanted to keep the existing businesses. They didn't want it to be an activity that displaced our local community business owners, that they wanted to support and retain them as a key strategy. And so we heard that all through public engagement activities. And that's what these policies and action items now frame what we heard. And we will work on achieving those.
It's ambitious.
They are ambitious plans, absolutely. But again, this is not a 1-year plan. And I think that's the piece that so often gets mistaken, especially when we're, normally a planner might do 1 comp plan in their career, maybe 2. We're going, by the time we hit the next one, we're going on 3 and 4 years, 5 years.
Averaging like 1.5 per year or something like that.
But it's important because addressing growth, coming back to the beginning of this presentation, is what set the stage for this conversation, because the city felt like it was behind. in what was happening with growth, and they didn't want to lose that identity. And again, we heard that from the community. The council heard that, and we wanted to get in front of it and look to where we want it to be as a community, and that's what this does.
Well, and I think the reality of that is probably not, I can't think of a better example for expressing that than our current fire station situation. The city has grown exponentially in terms of its housing. And we've got a 50-year-old fire station that's completely inadequate and probably fails every OSHA standard that there is, and a whole bunch of other stuff.
And that came from the planning commission. And Mark remembers this, that came from the planning commission because the review of development proposals coming through the commission and the evidence that there were impacts to public safety as a result of this growth. And the planning commission brought it to the city council and asked them to pause and consider the impacts of growth to fire safety. And the council heard the commission, and they launched into a very small study that was dramatic with regards to what they found with regards to the building and the service, etc. And it's changing the face of the fire department. In what, Mark, was it only 2 years ago that happened?
Yeah, and it all started from just lively debate on a sprinkler system. It's awesome to see where that came from, and to see what's going to happen next, and hopefully just make that city safer in the long run. So, all matters, like Heather's saying. Heather, can you speak real quick to how much grants have changed in the city just in the past couple of years? And it's all because of this.
I'm sorry, Mark, I cut you off. What did you say?
I was just saying, because you're talking about how they get developed and where it all comes from, but the big impact to me is how much the city's received because of doing it, because of updating the comp plan and having to go through all these legislative actions. It's just brought the city more money through grants and stuff, and I feel like that's a critical part of this process and how it all works and how it all contributes to the city in the end.
No, you're absolutely right, Mark, because when we go after state and federal grants, in particular for transportation, which is where I have a focus right now, we have to show that we've been through a community engagement process. We've identified that these are in our plans. They're not just, made up at the moment because it's a grant opportunity, that it's well thought out and connected. And this predates Zach and I, which is the city has been systematically preparing to address these infrastructure gaps in not just transportation, but water and sewer as well. And we're showing how each of these plans successfully build on the previous plan. It's a consistent message about how we want to address multimodal, transit, biking, and walking, and then level of service and safety, reconnecting the community. We applied last year as an example for the federal Reconnecting Community Grant because this is a community bisected by a highway. It's dividing the community's ability to access essential services. When we think about food, health, and education, they're all impacted by this highway. And by having these plans tied together and identifying the need in the community, it makes us more competitive for these grants. And as a result of that, since 2022, we have put together nearly $8 million in transportation, construction, and design grants. Prior to 2020, we had not received a transportation grant since 2010. No money, zero. That means that the only source of funding to fix any of the roadway issues, fix a sidewalk, only came from the city general fund. And eventually the city adopted the Transportation Benefit District, which only was producing a couple $100,000 a year. just to tell you how far ahead a couple $100,000 goes, we're designing a block or 2 blocks of US2, so Lawson to Lindstrom. That project is $1 million to design it. So it has reaped huge benefits for the community by laying out these maps, being really critical about thinking about how we're tying it all together. Like how are we getting the downtown access? How are we getting the schools access? How are we tying residents to basic services? And then, you know, having that in a strategic plan. And then we go forward and say, hey, we thought about it. This is the money we're going after. And the agencies are saying, yeah, I can see that. I think that you've thought about it. It's well thought out. You're making the network out of this. So keep our fingers crossed. We will continue to be successful, but that's I think what Mark, I think, was asking about is it's helped us be successful in getting money.
So is that, so you said the last grant where the city was getting grants was 2010. Now, is that based upon the person who was occupying your seat who did not have a vision for where we were going? So if somebody doesn't have a vision, then they're not going to pursue those things that are necessary. And or was it where we were in terms of growth as a city? Did that prohibit persons from pursuing the grants that were necessary? Because you can have a person in your position who's lazy, doesn't have vision, not going to do anything. And you could have, well, you can't apply for this grant because we don't meet the growth requirement. So my question is, was it one or the other, or was it both?
So growth is not a factor typically in these applications. It's needs. So the needs have been there through 2010 to now. Number 2 is I can't speak to what the individuals that held positions previously at the city were like, or did or didn't do. I mean, I have no knowledge of what grants were applied for or were not during that period of time. The piece that I think has been catalytic for the city is developing strategic partnerships within the community, and that we really took a closer look at how we're, in this case, transportation, how we were looking at developing a real network. And part of that is when you're looking at grant applications and then looking back to your plan, like, oh, wow, you know, I could have talked about that in the plan, or, oh, wow, you know, my plan isn't really doing the best job of demonstrating, you know, that this is a network or this is a community. So it's thinking about when you're going to be updating your policy, what you need to write it to make it reflect more closely the community vision and align with potentially the economic opportunities that are out there. So hopefully I answered your question as far as partnerships and developing a strategy and using that strategy moving forward.
Yeah, I think you did. I think that if I would add something to it, I think I remember as a former administrator, educator, Carol Dweck wrote a book called Fixed Mindset, Growth Mindset, where you have people who are satisfied with the status quo. But you need individuals in position who have a growth mindset. I think in smaller communities like this, the community fears the growth, which causes them to communicate, well, I don't think we need to grow that. I don't think we really need to grow because we don't want to be this big city. Now, if you have a bunch of people in the community talking like that, then you stay small. But if you want to be a vibrant, growing community, you have to have that growth mindset, which I think that the reason why and I haven't been here on the commission, just a couple of months, but the reason why Airway Heights is growing the way that it's growing is because the people who are in position have a growth mindset and they want to see the community grow in a way that is sustainable, that is going to be productive, that's going to provide the necessary things that are needed, which then leads me to what I've been thinking about as you've been talking, is when you look at the water, I'm fixated on the water. I'm fixated on the contamination of the wells. Like when are we satisfied for the next 10 years or the next 5 years buying water, purchasing water from Spokane? If we are, okay, that's one thing. But what is it going to cost to replace those wells that have been contaminated? And is that in the purview? Is that in the vision to replace those? Or are we leaving it to the next generation to deal with the problem? Are we passing it off? Because as I'm reading in here, and I understand that, it takes money to do all of the things that need to be done. But if we're growing at this rapid rate, at some point we have to break off and be independent of Spokane and say, hey, we've got to establish our own and be able to have our own, which then would help us as the community grows, the water grows, and the ability to access that grows as well. But if we are continuing to have to pay out more money to Spokane constantly, then that's taking from the growth of the city itself. I mean, does that make sense? Am I off, or does that make sense?
Andre, do you mind, I think that the water issue is definitely a concern of the cities. Like ever since that has happened, they've been trying to have a solution. We had a commissioner that I can't think of his name right now. Heather or Zach will remind me, but he went on to city council, and that was like his main issue, was bringing up the city water every time we talked about it. And I know Heather's mentioned recently that the city is looking to get into the aquifer just north of us, right, Heather?
Right, that's Hank Beinecker, who was on the planning commission, and
Thank you.
yep, that's, one of the options.
So it's definitely part of the issue. The other thing I'm just going to bring up real quick, going to your other point you were bringing up. When I first came on the commission, it was like things were stagnant. So you didn't have movement anywhere. It wasn't coming from any direction. That was, I think, a little over 5 years ago now. And you've seen it like change since that time period. It's the hires that the city has done, how city council has changed over. We've actually started making sure commissions get filled and stayed filled. And it's all based on the city rules and how we have to do certain actions before they go. But I think that time period before, it was just a lot of stagnant stuff going on throughout the city. And that's just been the change in time. But I know the whole time I've been in the community, 10 years, the growth has just been rapid and it's been consistent. And I think that now it's more about making sure that we catch up and stay like looking forward to the future versus the past, because that brings money to the city and helps the citizens of the city. So there's just a who knows what happens back then, but we're definitely moving forward now. And I know the city does have the water thing on the mind always.
I think that's a really great point, that there has been a lot of growth, and kind of touching back on a idea that you had, which is the community itself is also pro growth. And I've worked in communities that are not. And they are, so it's a community we've heard in the public engagement that is okay with the growth. They just want to make sure that the city grows responsibly, and that there are elements of the community that are retained, a small town feel, that we can get away from this idea of being a place you pass through to a place that you come to, and that they want to continue to see local businesses supported, more opportunities as some, some destination type of facilities, connecting to the community center. I mean, we hear those over and over again in the alternatives. I will answer your question with regards to the water in volume 2. When we review that in the meeting in September, we can go as deep down the well as you want.
Down the way.
And in that it talks about 4 options the city's considering for water. And one of them is in the aquifer, as Mark indicated. One is to put GAC filtration on the existing wells and pursue additional water rights here. Water from the city of Spokane are all part of the discussion.
So I'll just wait for comments to be continued.
Yep.
Right?
So I want to make our time really effective, because I promised you guys I wouldn't keep you more than 2 hours in a night, and it's at 7:30. Do you want to run through the draft, or do you have specific chapters or questions that you have about this? Because my goal at the end of today is to get a thumbs up, thumbs down that volume 1 is ready to go public. And we want to have a public open house with the community and put it online and start getting it out there for people to review.
I think we should just go page by page.
Oh my God. Did you hear that? Mark and
I
Becky,
did. I
oh my
think
Lord.
Dom, like, come on, man, go back to being quiet.
Well, I did go page by page.
Oh, I know, yeah.
Right.
It's some good
I think it's a thumbs up, honestly.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
Because of your and Zach's explanations and the discussions we've had, and you've entertained my seemingly endless questions. I think it's definitely a thumbs up. I have a couple of little things that are mostly structural. Like the references for what chapters a policy might apply to.
Parks and Recreation PR.
Right. So those little codes are not. I think in the plan they appear before there's any explanation as to what they mean.
Okay.
And it's like, I wish I wrote down the page number.
I'm sorry, my
There's
eyes
a
were-
graphic that shows what they mean, but they've actually begun before that.
I think it's all the way at the front of the plan.
It's way up there. Yeah, it's in the first chapter. I mean, it's way up there. When they first show up, if there's a way that we could introduce, like a footnote or something on the page, it just kind of says, what does this mean? Most of the codes are somewhat self-explanatory, I think, but like transportation XP, I laugh at that every time I see it, because my old office symbol in the Air Force was XP and it had nothing to do with transportation.
Okay.
It was plans. And so
It's really-
that one throws me every time I look at it. I see ED and I think education. I don't think
Right.
I should
development, yeah.
in the context of the plan. So little nitnoid things like that.
Sure.
And the only other one I saw in policy 05, ensure access to parks within the 10-minute or quarter mile of residential. Is that like 10-minute walk, 10-minute bike ride, 10-minute drive?
10-minute walk.
So I think that might be, maybe it's a typo.
Oh, yeah.
And that's, I know that's being super nitnoidy.
Oh no, I spent hours. I
What?
spent hours, and that was one of the reasons why we did not have the first meeting this month, is because of all of the corrections that were sent, and we asked them to have a proofreader go through this time. And I promise you, there are still typos in there, even though they told us that one's gone through,
Lot
but
of text, a lot of charts, a lot of, I'm sure, stuff imported and.
yeah.
and you just
And they're
can't-
converting it, yeah, from a Word to a PDF. So they're aware that they're gonna have to go through it again to proofread it. But that was again why we didn't have the meeting in early August, was because there were such extensive changes that we asked for.
Yeah, we just didn't have enough time. Like we went through it and there was not enough time between us going back to them.
Mhm.
Yeah.
What's it used to say, read it backwards. Stuff jumps out at you when you read it back. I honestly, folks, I think it's a great product. I mean, I can't even hazard a guess how many man hours went into putting this thing together. I'm sure it's zillions. But I think it's a product that the community can feel some ownership on. I like the fact that you could reference at the beginning, kind of that there was a lot of surveys and feedback and comment and all those things. And I think you presented that this is the community's product. It's not the city of Airway Heights' product. It's not the planning department's product. This is the community's product. So no, I think it's a great thing.
So
I agree. I totally agree. I think that we're moving forward. Oftentimes you can do that in a smaller community. In larger communities, it's like we're going to make the decision. We're not going to get everybody else feedback and all that other stuff. But it's great that people will be able to get online, access it, and then be able to maneuver through that. Most people are just blindly trusting, right? So they're like, okay, if this is it, then that's fine. It's good with me. But sometimes I'm a detailed person where I just have to look through things and make sure that, when you talk about sustainability and the community and are we having people who are part of the city who have a growth mindset, or do they have a fixed mindset? Because then we get stagnated, like Mark said, and then now we begin to stink. When things are stagnated, they get to stink. And so we just have to be able to do that. But I think this is good. And I think as we move forward, as you hand off something to somebody else, I think they have a great foundation to work from, so I think it's a go.
Good.
I concur. Yeah, I've been through this process on the council side before, and this go around is so much, I don't know, it's just much more friendly, easy, and yeah. Well, I mean, I think back, it's been decade and a half since, and it was just a whole different process back then compared to the way the format you guys had put this into. And it was, granted, sitting there staring at a computer for hours reading through it and little charts, or they kind of get a little mind numbing. But I like the idea of going out with the layman's version. It'll just make it a lot easier for the people that do go out and look at it. I mean, I'm not sure how many do. It's, I kind of I try to remember like the engagement at the beginning. You definitely had people engaged, but when you look at the percent of the population, it's still, like anything, you get the core people that kind of cross over all the time and are involved. And
The 20/80 rule.
yeah, and I don't even know if it's that high, but it's still, a small percentage, and some of those circles cross over in multiple areas.
That's a really good point. That we're competing against everything else. So leagues, school, job, family, to get attention, to this. And until something resonates with a person, it's just not that important. And people operate mostly in faith that it's going in the right direction. But I can't guarantee that there are going to be surprises down the road, that something's going to occur that, that hasn't been thought of. But then again, we get to redo this again in another year. So, but I think that the great thing though is we have a chance to make some inroads in some of those areas to make a difference today, which is leads Zach and I into doing some code changes and some map changes, so that by the time we adopt the next plan in 2026, which would be 3 more years, that there is a plan for that 3 years that's going to help us with growth and addressing what the community's priorities are, give a framework for the Arts Commission on how they look at art, give us a framework for how we look at economic development and grants and so forth. So again, is there any other questions?
Brenda, did you have any questions or anything? I know you were just appointed on Monday and you got this email yesterday, but.
So basically what I'm going to say because I'm so new to this, actually the entire process, from how you've been able to explain it and answer the questions, it made complete sense to me. And as someone said earlier, with the TikTok, audiences can only, digest just small chunks. I think this is well done.
Oh, thank you.
We'll see if the city can start a TikTok channel and we'll do comp plan TikTok.
I'd rather do a TED Talk. At least you get 10 minutes.
nice.
I'd much rather do a
Nice.
TikTok.
Well,
anything.
Heather, I think, or did I cut you off, Zach? I apologize.
No, you're good. I'm just,
I'm sorry, I don't want to cut you off. My apologies.
no, you're good.
Well,
Go ahead, Mark.
I think everybody is in consensus though that the plan is let's get it out there. Let's go on to part 2. And the citizens do trust the city right now, and you guys are doing great work.
Well, thank you. Well, with that, we're gonna go back to the PowerPoint and we're gonna do a project timeline, and then you guys are gonna get out of here early.
You want to talk about the maps first or after?
Oh, I'm sorry, we have to talk about the maps. So I apologize. Zach has an overview of a couple of map cleanups to present to you as well. So there was the big colored map showing the land use, and that was what came out of the engagement process and the alternatives. We also identified that there were some items that needed to be fixed. And those are typically areas where we're concerned that there's a consistency issue with our comprehensive plan. And just to give you a little backup and give Zach a couple minutes to bring the map up. By state law, in order to have zoning, you have to have this master land use map. So that's the comprehensive land use map. It doesn't have to exactly match zoning, but to give you an idea, the land use map has to show the same kind of general land use in order eventually for a rezone to happen. So you can't do gray in a red area as a business on, and you can't rezone it unless the master land use map calls it gray, and that's industrial. Does that make sense? So you can't convert a gray, which is industrial, to residential because the comprehensive plan shows it as gray. And I'm using colors because there's a map up with very vivid visual examples of that. So what we have found is that some of our categories aren't necessarily, of land uses, are not matching what we see on the ground with the property and what the intent may be of what some of these land use designations are. So just really quickly, our comp plan designations are public, which you're supposed to designate a public building or public lands, where wastewater treatment is designated public. It's not commercial, it's not industrial, it's a treatment plant. It will always be a treatment plant. We have in the comp plan, they use pastels, but essentially we would see variation of yellow through orange as residential, and we would see red as commercial and gray as industrial. Green is open space or recreation. That's typically like the parks are going to be green. They'll always be green moving forward. And in our particular and unique case, we have tribe trust lands, which we've designated as orange. They are sovereign nations. They are not subject to local zoning and local land use. And so they're like a color because they're excluded from our land use designations. We have no legal right to apply them over that property. That's what it means. So go ahead, Zach, and go through your cleanups.
Yeah, so there are really 3 kind of chunks here. So the first one's pretty straightforward. So these blue buildings here, or parcels or areas, are designated for public right now. So these areas, this is the building office, the building department office. This is the police department. This is the parking lot across the street. This is the building we're in on this parcel. These are the 2 buildings. This is the fire department and the parking lot adjacent to that. So we're proposing to take those away from public and put them into the commercial category. Main reason being we just got a new structure. We're planning on selling these eventually. And if we sold them right now, the zoning is an issue because it says you can only do stuff like this in this area. So, and able to clean that up, we're going to designate them as commercial. The nice thing about the commercial designation is that everything we're doing in the public is also allowed within that. So we're actually, we can still function perfectly fine, have no, issues with that. So that's the first big piece. Sorry, I'm bouncing back and forth here. We'll do the easy one, then we'll do the big one. Which is this piece up here. I know it's really random. And the reasons why it's really random is because it's a mistake. So when we redesignated this a few years back, I don't know how it happened, but it's definitely, since my responsibilities maps, it's my fault. So somehow it got designated, you can see it up here, as I think medium density residential, which makes no sense whatsoever. It's a driveway to access the Spokane County Raceway Park. So it's a mapping error. We actually have code that allows us to go and fix this individually, but since we're doing it anyway, we're just going to clean it up. So that's the fun one. And then the bigger one is actually down here on the south side of town. And it will kind of go through some of these sites individually. And I apologize, it's kind of clunky, but. So on the south side of town, as we've gone over a couple of times, but Brenda, you may not know, there's some pretty stringent limitations on land use, mostly pertaining to Fairchild Air Force Base. There's a number of overlays. I can give you a brief. I love having one screen, it's just the best. So those are what our overlays look like on the south side of town. Every single one of those overlays restricts a certain type of land use, mainly residential and high intense non-residential uses. Think like a Target, something like that, that brings a lot of people into a specific area. So we have this large chunk of land down here, and we have a lot of it established as commercial. Over the past couple of years, a lot of this kind of fringe area that's located between the industrial designation and the commercial along Highway 2. We've gotten a lot of requests for projects that don't really fit with the zoning because they're, 10, 15 acre pieces adjacent to industrial lands on the south side of town where large commercial projects are restricted because the density issues. We also have some of these that are already built out. Vitsky Village here is a non-conforming residential use. We're not going to designate that as residential because, again, it's located within those Sound Core areas, but we know that that's probably not going to change anytime soon. A lot of what's going on here is actually aggregate mining, I believe, or
It's in the gray area.
right here is kind of the
That's where their
that's
offices
the
are.
That's when construction equipment's parked. and
yeah, so
stuff.
that's a supporting an industrial area. So we have it designated as commercial. Doesn't make a ton of sense. We have this parcel here has a CUP, a conditional use permit. They're developing it as storage right now. And as I move over here, I'm not going to go by every single parcel, but there are just a couple big ones I want to hit. This one here is a Zach Designs. Zach Designs has been there for a very, very long time and is very, very much an industrial use, but we have to designate it as commercial.
It's a short manufacturing and stitching facility.
Yeah.
What's that little blue?
So that's a public, I think that's a water well. Yeah. There's a couple of those throughout the city that are kind of there. The other one is Cyrus O'Leary's here, which again is in a commercial zone. So what we're proposing is to actually just push the industrial designation up to carry over a lot of these areas. And also down here, it's either vacant or it is has an industrial use on it. So that's really the three big pieces is we're looking to convert these to commercial. So when we do sell them, they'll be able to be used, fix my mistake, and then kind of push these industrial areas a little bit further north. So the uses that either are existing on them that are already industrial, or just anecdotally talking to various representatives and owners of these parcels, most of what they're looking to do is industrial. I don't get a lot of questions about that. So, I mean, probably once a month, I'm talking about some of this, and the conversation always ends with, well, you have to amend the comprehensive plan is where it always ends with. So we're hoping to develop that. And again, having these large parcels, unless you're subdividing them into smaller parcels for commercial, it doesn't seem like they're likely to be developed. The other piece is we want to make sure we're maintaining that commercial zoning and designation along Sunset Highway. So we're not taking any commercial zone off the highway, but we're just pushing those industrial designations up. So these are recommendations. We want to get you guys' thoughts on it. Nothing set in stone, but that's kind of where we're at. At least on this piece, the other two are pretty much, I mean, we're going to do that. But in this case, does anybody have any thoughts or opinions on converting these to an industrial designation?
No, because you can still do a commercial for the most part.
For the most part, yeah.
Will still work in light industrial, right? So
Yeah, it's just opening it up to more light industrial
it just
uses.
makes more sense doing it that way. So
Yeah. And I don't know if you drive by, but you'll kind of look to the south and there's this kind of no man's land there right now. So in my thought here is to try and open this up to some sort of development. We have had a couple projects. We had one that came in. Heather had to hear me whine about this because it was a really great project. But it turned out, it was a large, I think it was on one of these over here, but it was this large industrial facility that wanted to do work. They did igniter switches or something like that for industrial refrigerators, but it was $1 million project, bringing in all these jobs, but it came down to the overlay didn't work out. And they would have had to do a comprehensive plan amendment to get it going, but they were willing to do that, but it all came down to J-list. So it just seems like, yeah, it hasn't been working. This has been designated commercial for 20 years.
Yeah, at least, well, close probably since at least 2008.
Yeah. So this is the idea, just to help open up, maybe it's some additional uses that'd be more appropriate for the sound contours and the overlays there. So.
Yeah, I think it makes sense south of Sunset Highway. I do want to know though why like the public property that's going, you guys are zoning it commercial next, or wanting to zone it commercial. Why it's not be considered for residential, seeing that like right there behind the library, it's housing, right behind where you guys are, it's housing, and we do have a housing shortage.
Pretty sure all that is still within the sound contour is what's going on there. Let me pull it up real quick. Oh, sorry. Still getting used to our new buttons.
I think the commercial makes sense though, because you can do both, or you can do commercial down below if you wanted to put new buildings up and then residential above. Both. And it really goes with the downtown plan of, because right now, I've got a rental house in 13th Avenue.
Mhm.
My property is more valuable on a rental basis or anything as residential than it is what we can generate for commercial right now. So I think it makes, I applaud it. I like the idea of those going to commercial because it just gives you a lot more flexibility. Like I said, going with an actual kind of turning the downtown off the highway and got a spot where you can utilize it.
Yeah. So the idea here, Mark, is it also comes from our downtown plan. The downtown plan did establish these as commercial. But I mean, we could look at doing residential. I'm not.
No,
What do you think about
honestly,
that?
because once you bring that downtown, that does make a lot of sense. And like Don's saying, like you still have residential in that situation. So yeah, that makes total sense.
Okay.
Okay. Well, if the planning commission is okay with that, then we'll move this forward as part of what we go to public with. for some map cleanups. Okay,
Yeah, that makes sense to me.
thank you. So the final part, I think this image that Zach found in our new stock photography is great.
Mark will recognize that.
Where are we
Yeah.
going? Where are we going? So as I mentioned, we have a timeline. So today was reviewing the volume 1. We do have to do a mandatory environmental review on the document that will happen in September. And so we'll be notifying the state and various agencies of the opportunity to review the environmental document. Our next meeting on September 13th, we're proposing to bring volume 2. And so that will be going back through the chapters and looking at kind of the deeper dive. We'll look at the water, capital planning, which is going to be pretty much around the civic complex idea, the transportation planning, which will include our 6 and 20-year transportation projects. We'll go through the map. And we can show you what the Leland analysis looks like, which would be in there, which is the market analysis that was commissioned for letting us know how much growth and where over the 20-year period. Then our goal tentatively would be to have an open house on September 27th. We have to confer with our consultants on this for both both volume 1 and 2. And it would be both in person and online opportunities. So it would not be exclusively just showing up at a location. So surveys, visual documentation, etc., so people can become familiar with the plan. Then our goal would be in September through October that we would begin briefing the city council on the plan. You've had the benefit of seeing each of the chapters in volume 1. The last time they saw it was after the preferred alternative, land use alternative, was selected. So we'll be doing a similar overview of the document with them. Tentatively, we're looking at a commission hearing, the first meeting in October. So we are requiring a public hearing for the opportunity to take public input on the draft. So they'll be from the beginning of September through October. The plans will be on a website. They'll be accessible to the public. We'll put out information driving to the website. People can see it. So when they come to the planning commission meeting, they'll have the opportunity to have at least seen the document. And then tentatively, we'd be looking at 2 hearings for the council. And this is a requirement of an ordinance as a first hearing, where there's really no testimonies taken. It's just like an overview of the document. And then on November 6th, we would actually have the city council mandatory second hearing. And at that point, there would be public testimony and potentially an adoption of the document. These are fluid based on being able to, of course, complete the necessary minimum requirements, go through the council, and be able to schedule these hearings as outlined here. So with that, we certainly could be done before Thanksgiving with the comprehensive plan. Rest assured, Zach and I have plenty of work for you to do before then and during this time. So you don't get to sit back and relax.
On Thanksgiving.
Maybe on
Nice.
Thanksgiving, but so this is a tentative timeline. So I just wanted to give you an overview and see if there was any comments or concerns or questions about it.
I look forward to sticking to it.
Okay, awesome. Look forward to sticking to it too. Great. All right. Well, with that, that concludes our presentation on the agenda for the volume 1 comprehensive plan. I'll hand it back to you, Mark.
Well, thank you for all that. I really do look forward to doing these things upcoming, and I hope we can stay as close to that timeline as possible. If anybody doesn't have anything, I'm going to adjourn this at 7:57 on the 23rd of August, 2023. See you all on the 13th of September.
All right.
All right.
So thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mark.
Good
Thank
night.
you.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Brenda.
Brenda.
Have a good night.
I
All right. Good night.